Well, I was raised in a Christian home. My dad was the youth minister at the small little church where I grew up. And I really don't ever remember a time that I didn't love the Lord and really know who He was and really understand even His ideas and principles for my life. And it was important to me, it was important to my family. But one of the things that was also an issue is I was very, very shy growing up. And when I hit middle school, junior high age, I started to notice that there was this group of kids. And they just seemed to have it all together. And if you were one of them, life was easier. And they were the popular kids. And so in my mind, I just decided, I'd really like to be one of them. And started to make just little by little choices so that I could fit in with a different crowd. And got into high school. My junior year of high school, things are still going pretty well, but I decided I would try out for cheerleader. And I got cheerleader, and I remember thinking then, that this was just exactly how I had hoped it would be. There were 10 girls that tried out for cheerleader, and only one didn't make it. So that really says nothing about my athletic ability. But it certainly was a time when I began to weigh what I had been raised to believe versus what I was now experiencing. And I had a whole different group of friends, was going to parties. And again, I would say it was just little compromises along the way. Not very long after that, I met this young man. And he was captain of the football team, class president, class favorite, you name it, and he was it. And he decided that he kind of liked me. And at that moment, I thought, this is exactly what I thought would happen, and I wish I'd have done all of this sooner. My parents, however, knew this young man and said, no way, you will not be dating him. Well, being 17 and so much wiser than they were, I decided that I would go ahead and date him, and eventually we would break up, and nobody gets hurt, and nobody really has to know. And so we began dating. And not very long after that, the relationship became sexual. And I can tell you that for the both of us, it changed immediately. Because to him now, it was just like every other relationship that he had had. And he was perfectly fine to move on to the next one. For me, it was very devastating because I had signed every worth the wait card ever printed, knew that sex was something to be saved for marriage and had intended to do that. And when I had not, in my mind, began to rationalize and felt like if I can just stay with him, then that would be the best thing. And so the relationship became very dysfunctional very quickly, even to the point of being physically abusive at times. The end of my senior year, I missed a period and went to a pregnancy center. And I can remember sitting there by myself with this woman and finding out that I was pregnant. And she said, what do you think you're going to do? And I knew that we wouldn't choose abortion. I knew that everyone would be very shocked and hurt and upset. But we were a Christian family and we didn't believe in that. And so I left the pregnancy center and went to tell Mr. Wonderful. And his response was something like, gosh, sure didn't mean for that to happen, and I hope this comes out okay for you, but I'm out of it. And he was. And so I went home to tell my parents. And I can remember telling my dad in the driveway of our house. And, this happened 20 years ago. And no matter how many times I've told the story, I can still feel that same feeling in the pit of my stomach of what it felt like to tell my dad that not only had I been lying and sneaking around, but that we had been sexually active and I was pregnant. And, the thing about it is it's so important for pregnancy centers to understand that time is crucial in a situation like this because really no one wants to have an abortion. I heard a woman say once, Frederica Matthews Green is her name, and she says, no one wants an abortion like they want an ice cream cone or a new car. but like an animal caught in a trap, willing to gnaw off its own leg to escape. And when people find themselves in that moment, it is just a flood of emotion. They feel angry and fearful and ashamed and just the full gamut. And if a person makes a decision in that moment, it's not likely going to be a good one. And we panicked. My dad panicked because he was the youth minister and we couldn't let people know. I think with issues like sexual integrity or abortion, those of us who are the body of Christ, we feel like these are things that happen to those other people. It doesn't happen to us, and it's the other socioeconomic group or other ethnic group or those people that do those things, and it's just not true. It happens in the church, and it affects even those of us in the church. My dad and I decided that the best thing to do would be for me to have an abortion. And we drove 2 hours south of Amarillo and had an abortion. And, my dad would tell you, as we sat there that day, there were people everywhere standing against the walls. Every chair was taken. And my dad would say that sitting there, he looked around and thought, how can you people do this? But our situation is different. And it is just such an isolating, fearful place to be. And that's why the work of pregnancy centers is so important. But we did have the abortion, and it really almost destroyed our family. My parents almost divorced. I don't know that I was ever suicidal, but certainly hopeless for a couple of years until I found out about a post-abortion ministry where I live and attended that class. And that is the most incredible thing that I have done in my life, because it was an opportunity to admit that that was sinful, that it was the wrong choice, but that God could forgive me and He could still use me. And He is such a redeeming, amazing God. And He certainly has done that in my life and has been far better to me than I could have ever deserved.